hello everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the All Partners Access Network Brown Bag, hosted by the Army Reserve Knowledge Management Directorate. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. This session, for those of you on APAN, it's being held live in resident at USARC headquarters, as well as online through APAN Adobe Connect, which we'll talk about today. And then we'll also offer a recording and slides for on-demand e-learning and future reference. We did hold a session on APAN once before. It was a little over a year ago, and we just wanted to reintroduce the topic to those of you who might be new to the command, and also advise you of some recent changes to the platform, and then build upon the knowledge from last year's session. The Army Reserve KM Directorate is led by Colonel Kokenauer and Captain Winfield here at Fort Bragg. And Captain Winfield is joining us today, so we'd like to welcome Captain Winfield to the team.
Yay, Captain Winfield!
My name is Jackie McCrory, and I'm a knowledge management, content management trainer on the team. If you'd like to get on our distribution list, or if you require any knowledge management assistance, you can always reach out to me or to anyone on the contract support team for help. We do have a support desk, and our ticketing system is listed here in addition to the group email box as well. So let's get started. This was introduced to you in the email and the invitation, but the target audience for this session is anyone and everyone who wants to learn more about APAN. And I'll be happy to provide you with the insights on the useful capabilities and features of this platform during today's session.
Sorry, we didn't say lock them out.
Okay, so our agenda today shows that we'll discuss what APAN is. We'll provide an overview of its features and capabilities. We'll discuss the different platforms and types that are available, both Intelligent and SharePoint based, as well as hybrids. And we'll also provide just a brief introduction of some of the real-world use cases, and several of these are new. They were not in last year's session, but due to wildfires, hurricanes, and things of that nature, I'll be showing you those examples. So at the end of the session, we'll also talk about how to get an account, the future of APAN, their roadmap, and some of the things that they have coming in the near future, and how you can get support as well. So what is APAN? It is a web-based, non.mil platform. It's provided by the Defense Information System Agency that we know as DISA. And it is a platform designed for collaboration. Specifically, it was developed to foster information and knowledge sharing between the DoD and non-DoD entities, such as non-governmental organizations. And one great feature of APAN is that it's available to any user with an internet connection, and it does not require a CAC for access. So APAN was developed over 10 years ago at PACOM. It was formerly known as the Asia Pacific Area Network, so that's the origin of the acronym. And the PACOM J73 serves as the ASP, or Application Service Provider, for all of the APAN development, the testing and staging, system administration, knowledge management, and they also support the service desk, outreach, their R&D efforts, and event support that we'll talk about later on. And in October 2011, it was designated as a DoD Shared Enterprise Service for Unclass Information Sharing, or UISS, that we have down there at the bottom. And it is currently funded through DISA, so there's no cost at all to use APAN's basic services. Here you can see the governance roles played in the oversight, management, operation, and maintenance for APAN. Just a few takeaways from this that the KM Directorate would like you to know is that, again, APAN is funded through DISA. There's no cost to use those services, as I mentioned. And also, APAN has fantastic support, we'll talk about towards the end too. So they've recently gone from a 24-hour desk to a 12/6, but they're incredibly responsive, and you usually get answers to your inquiries very, very quickly. So bottom line up front here, APAN operates with an appropriate level of confidentiality, integrity, authentication, non-repudiation, and availability. The item that you see in bold there on this slide refers to APAN being a system that supports deployed and contingency forces, so it has a lot of additional safeguards in place with that DoDD. And in our wiki page, we do have more information about that if anyone is curious about the terminology in that, or wants more information about the HTTPS and the secure socket layer, the SSL that they have in place too. So APAN does use a secure hash algorithm, and they just want to prevent man-in-the-middle and eavesdropping attacks. So it has a lot of oomph behind it, you know, to make sure that it's always functional and secure. So APAN is used in a variety of ways. It's best known for its use during humanitarian assistance and disaster response. You'll see that acronym in a lot of places as well associated with APAN, the HADR. So such as the Haiti response effort and major hurricane response that we'll see in the real world examples. APAN is also heavily used for conferences and exercises, especially for those involving our international partners. And then, as many of you know, our Army Reserve Knowledge Management Directorate uses it for our distance learning training, our knowledge management working groups, or KIMWIGs, and other events such as the Brown Bag today. So we'll get into the enterprise portal options. APAN has its own platform. It's called Telligent, as well as Sharepoint, and that's currently Sharepoint 10, migrating over to 13 in the immediate future this month, actually. So we're going to touch on those platforms in a few moments when we talk about communities. But for this slide, we just wanted to make you aware that APAN has something new coming out. So it's the Information Sharing Service and Platform, ARC-GIS. So that's going to make mapping services available for users with all experience levels. It's currently in a test phase with just a few selected users, and APAN will be rolling it out as soon as they can to all users. And they have a demo that will be September 23rd, so we'll have more information about the release of the ARC-GIS and the mapping in the very near future. So APAN incorporates a suite of unstructured social tools. Those would include things like blogs, forums, wikis, the commenting, mentions, likes, and hashtags. The web conferencing rooms offer the audio and video recording features. We're using those today as well. And there's great chat features. Specifically, there is also private and group chat, as well as multilingual chat. And then APAN also has the suite of structured content management tools. And currently that would be SharePoint 2010. Also file sharing, metadata and tagging, and custom lists. And APAN offers calendars, email, and subscriptions. And then again, it has those GIS tools, the Geographic Information Systems mapping tools currently available, and then ARC-GIS will be releasing soon. So here's another shot, just all the tools in the APAN toolbox. We saw mention of those unstructured and structured tools on the last slide, which are those two bulleted sections towards the top. But there are also user-specific tools on the bottom left there, which include personal profiles, private messaging, email notifications, and then things like your filtered search, mobile access, as well as the translation services, which include the web pages, chat, and documents too. So another great feature of APAN is that you can tune it to APAN Lite if you have low bandwidth. And we've used this in our directorate. When we have a lot of users in our sessions, we've just tweaked the overall quality and greatly improved the connectivity for everyone participating so that no one drops. So we're quite pleased with it in the KM directorate.
Sorry.
A few other services and tools include lessons learned, metrics for your groups, email accounts, and event registration, which is also helpful. So here we've just highlighted a few of the lesser known services that are valuable, and they may help your organization solve some of its challenges. The translation is pretty handy, and then there you have an image of what the GIS mapping capability looks like. And to have it fully functional on mobile is another great feature as well. So APAN, working closely with combatant command stakeholders, developed the APAN chat app, and that's available for Android and iOS. And it enables APAN users to use the peer-to-peer chat with their APAN colleagues. And then as with web chat, the chat app is integrated with translation. So it enables users to chat in their preferred language. And in a few slides, I'll show you a drop down and what that looks like. And the chat apps are available for download on either the Apple App Store and Google Play. Does anyone have any questions so far on the capabilities and services? Okay, please feel free to ask online too through APAN if you have any as well. So some additional services that they offer. APAN has performance metrics, and it also has that integrated Sharepoint calendar you see on the bottom left. We've talked a little bit about translation. The capabilities are pretty robust there, with lots of languages as well. They do include the document and freeform translation. And then we'll talk more about hybrid sites. Those are sites that use both SharePoint and Intelligent, the features together. So the translation capabilities are offered for those hybrid sites as well.
So they can be linked with the SharePoint to communicate?
You can use, even if you have Intelligent, you can use some of the features that are based that we'll talk to in a few slides. Yeah, it's pretty nice. So once you get an account, which we'll introduce the steps a little bit later in this session, you can browse the existing communities on the Exercise and Communities tab. You can also search for specific communities using that search box. If there is a specific group that's set to either unlisted or invisible, unfortunately you won't be able to find it. So the Premier Support Group is an example. If you have a need to know some of the urgent announcements and changes that are coming out, a member of this Premier Support Group, like myself, if you do need to be added, let me know, and I can add you to that unlisted group. So I've mentioned communities of interest. We do have one in the Army Reserve KM Directorate. And then all information on APAN is organized in these types of communities. So once you get your APAN account, you'll get access to the information that's publicly accessible. And then, as I mentioned, with the private information, you just need to request access to a community of interest if it's listed but private. And then communities can be built in the two main collaboration environments. That would be either the Sharepoint platform or APAN's own Intelligent platform. And as I mentioned, that hybrid of both. So APAN sites are powered by SharePoint, currently SharePoint 2010. That's going to change as of the 10th through the 12th, and it'll shift to a SharePoint 2013 backend. So being built on that SharePoint platform, they do have a structured way to share information using lists and libraries. So those are APAN sites. If it's called an APAN group, that is powered by Intelligent, which provides that social, unstructured way to share information. We've listed some of the responsibilities here if you are considering taking on the role of becoming either a group or site owner. And that would be that list there where you'll control the visibility, access, and membership, the look and feel, be able to manage content. And if you are responsible for managing content, that would ensure you'd want to make sure that only unclassified information is shared there, that there's no spillage. And then as the owner, you are responsible for deciding which of the tools and capabilities you want to incorporate into your community of interest. And then the KM team, we can advise and give some basic information about that, but the APAN knowledge managers and the KM team that APAN has will work with the community of interest owners directly. They'll help you identify your information sharing requirements, what you need in your environment, and then they'll suggest some tools and services to meet those requirements. So let's say if you're in charge of an exercise or an event, or if you're participating in a working group where you need to share information with non-DoD participants, you can set up an APAN community of interest, and then that APAN knowledge manager will have a consultation with you about the features to add. So if you are trying to decide between the two platforms, the basis of do you want a group, do you want a site, this can help you in your decision making. So I'll just give everyone a moment to take a look at that. We'll take a pause for any questions so far online. I see a few pop-ups.
Is this designed to replace steps and/or Mill Suite?
So it is not designed to replace those. It's something that could be offered either in addition to it. The KM Director, actually, we have a presence on all of those platforms. We're on the ARNet. We have a Mill Suite group. We are on APAN, and we're also on DEPS. So it just would matter, who you want your audience to be. Is it someone, are you communicating with someone who does not have a CAC, who needs to access, or who can't get on your network? But it's certainly not going to replace any of those. It's just another platform you have as an alternative. So that's a great question.
Someone's typing.
So one word, important thing I think is worthy of just calling out there. The light version is only available on Intelligent Platform. So SharePoint-based platform does not have that light version. And then it also depends on the owner or your user experience. Intelligent, many people find a lot more user-friendly. If you have people who are extremely, trained up on SharePoint and a lot of, organizational depth there, they're not just a single point of failure, you might, in that case, be comfortable with SharePoint. But I'd say overall the tendency is to go Intelligent as you did, Captain Winfield. So here are some examples on this next slide. These are screenshots of APAN groups in particular, and we will next explore some of the features in the Intelligent Platform specifically. We're going to start out with this one since it's user-friendly, and we'll see some of those social media functions and example of announcements. So some of these slides will go quickly, but for those who are visual learners, I know I like to just see a flash of an example of what it might look like. So again, this is Intelligent. This next slide here is Intelligent social media that we talked about. So we talked about those likes, mentions, hashtags, and comments. Those aren't things that are just there for fun. They actually are, the intent of them is to help bring attention to the content that you want your teammates to pay attention to.
Chief Witherspoon,
Yes.
going into your topics, does this allow for information mirroring from one platform to another? For instance, can I produce a product on SharePoint and have it automatically mirrored on APAN?
It does not have that function currently.
Unless they're using SharePoint that's built into APAN, correct?
Yes, yeah. So right now we're talking about the Intelligent Platform, and in a few slides we'll see the SharePoint Platform. The examples that you'll see on the screen will be SharePoint 2010, but if you were to have two sites, it's not going to just automatically mirror another. So I mentioned the likes, mentions, hashtags. So we could see some examples of that here. So you may not see my cursor. I'm trying to get it, but
What are you cursing?
the first top box, where it says leave a comment, a lot of us are used to seeing that. You could see the likes, where it's starred over on the right, and all of the comments in that bottom red box. This next slide, we see just an example of some announcements. So for the purpose of this brown bag, we just want to make you aware that Intelligent, you can set announcements. These are relatively similar to SharePoint. SharePoint does have announcement features too, of course, but Intelligent, this is what your screen would look like for announcements. And this will go quickly because this next example, just another screenshot of what a forum bulletin board would look like Intelligent. So APAN does have the capability to host those kind of forum bulletin boards as shown here. This feature, Intelligent, is somewhat similar to what you may be used to in SharePoint with community features. So it's just a little different nuance in what they look like. Next we have media. So intelligent media galleries allow you to use tags. You can sort your information. You can also include a word cloud of those tags. So that's a word cloud is when you have a lot of different instances of things, and if it's a very commonly used word, it shows up larger. You can also sort and share URLs elsewhere. So that's just a shot of what the media looks like. And you can see the person on the right there, Laura Coutinho. She's one of our colleagues, and she is the APAN Knowledge Manager. If you ever have questions related to APAN, I can always ping her at any time. So here's an example of a map where you can create it within your group, intelligent. You can add points, lines, shapes, layers, and feeds. And you can also search for specific locations. This is their basic original mapping that's been in place for quite a while. And the ArcGIS, that's just going to get more and more complex. And I know, Larry, you've been involved, I think, in our mapping working group that we had a while ago. And one of the conversation pieces in there was how expensive, the ArcGIS licensing was per person. So this is just a great feature, going forward. And we'll talk more about the ArcGIS in a few moments, but it's great that we'll have that and that it'll be free. So if you've ever attended our Knowledge Management Director's SharePoint training, we do discuss permissions in increased detail there as you move throughout the training. But in APAN, SharePoint does offer community owners very detailed control over specific user access permissions. Intelligent, the terminology is roles for user access control. But it is something that is secure and that you can decide who accesses your content. APAN also currently offers custom libraries and lists. Here you're seeing an example of SharePoint 2010 in this screenshot of a document library. I like the visual, I think it's helpful. Here's another visual just of the calendar. These are SharePoint calendars. They do have that familiar look that we're used to seeing in the traditional month view or in Outlook. You can use them in APAN too. And next we'll talk briefly about the hybrid platform. So Captain Winfield, that's what we were speaking about earlier. You can add, even if you choose Telligent, you can actually add SharePoint libraries and lists to your Telligent groups as well. And that's what they call, or is what's known as the hybrid platform. Specifically, a SharePoint document library does have extra document management features that Telligent does not have, unless you choose to make it a hybrid. So if it's SharePoint document library, you can use those features like check-in and check-out. We're not super fans of that in case someone forgets to check it back in. But it's also good for version control, access control per file, and that sort of thing. And then lists also support SharePoint calendar and task lists. And again, owners can control access using those SharePoint permissions, but this does create a significant management burden as you're going and auditing that. So hybrid groups can just be aware if you do choose to go a hybrid group route with a lot of permissions that are granted to single files, that just makes extra work on the owner there. So all of APAN's other features that we've mentioned are still the same on Telligent, SharePoint, and hybrid platforms. They work on all. On the next 3 slides, I mentioned those visuals. We'll see some examples of chat, translation, and the Adobe Connect. I'm going to pause for any. So chat. APAN allows you to view multiple chats and private chats at once in APAN as well as Adobe Connect, which we're using now. So you can open the chat either in a separate window, and you can maintain ongoing group and person-to-person chat sessions while you're continuing to work in your APAN community. And you can also monitor those multiple chat conversations in one interface. I mentioned chat allows translation, so we'll see that next on this slide here. So chat and other features, translation will automatically convert pages as well as those APAN chats by clicking that language drop down that you see there. It's in the bottom left where the red box is around Japanese. So if you want, whether you want French or Japanese, APAN has it and it'll do it automatically for you, which is quite nice. This next screen, for those of you here in the room, it may not be so familiar, but for those online, or if you've ever been, TDY or on travel and want to check out our distance learning events, our team is a big fan of this Adobe Connect feature. We used to use DCO, DCS, and we had a lot of connectivity issues and drops and things like that. So APAN's been really great for us. We're using it now to bring this to our audience who can't attend in person. We even use the chat services to communicate with participants when we have our working groups every month. So when we have those KimWigs, we get feedback, online throughout, and then over the phone as well, of course. And then during our other distance learning events too. It's great to work with our students this way.
Chief Witherspoon, that fine gentleman, does say that the translation feature is amazing.
Yes. Yes, I think APAN's quite proud of it too. So we'll just hit on this briefly. APAN does have knowledge managers. Laura Coutinho is a colleague of ours. We work with her, just through the CAM directorate, and she's also a Booz Allen colleague, and we know her quite well. She sits in Durham. She's even talked, if we want to take this another step, she's happy to visit us, and we can explore any advanced training that we have as well. So again, those knowledge managers like Laura, they do help users with their communities. They'll analyze, what capabilities you have, help you determine what tools are appropriate for you and for your specific community. They also really help a lot with lessons learned. So they'll review any kind of past lessons learned. They'll look through technological solutions, something that might help mitigate any, potential repeated pitfall that you could have. And they also do communicate new information sharing requirements to the development team. So Laura works closely with her program manager and with the developers, and she keeps me very well informed of what's coming on the horizon as well with the platform in general. And then they take it a step further. They'll even create user stories, develop and brief presentations about APAN, and just provide on-the-spot customizations. If you do have a community and you want it to look nicer, better, have one of the APAN knowledge managers do some HTML, JavaScript. They actually have all that capability. In addition to those types of services, they also support events. So through their knowledge managers, they help position you and all their users for continued success. They will develop guidance, business rules, and plans, if it's specific to an event or exercise. And they'll also communicate with the command, with KM at the strategic, operational, and tactical levels during exercises. So this is just good to know that, if you need help with developing, IM, KM guidance, business rules, that they are there for you.
AR North uses APAN for all the joint exercises where they integrate the Army Reserve, National Guard, active duty, and they use APAN a lot to make sure they're synced and everything is going on with the exercises that Nickel Resolve in Canada. They use it in conjunction with the British and everything. So it is a good, very good system.
That's great. And they also obtain feedback during every event. They bring that back to the APAN headquarters, and they do have an agile product team. So their product development teams will provide additional troubleshooting, and they can even code future enhancements and make sure that they have a hand in continuously improving things too. So I mentioned we'd show some examples of some real-world crisis support. So since last year, we presented it, I think, early last July. So it's been about 13 months, and unfortunately, some terrible things have happened in the world. We've talked about APAN's origins, providing that platform for humanitarian assistance and disaster response. So these are some examples of some international real-world crisis support from APAN, and this would include things like typhoons, disease outbreaks, earthquakes, and hurricane support. So the hurricanes that affected the domestic areas that we'll see in the next slide, of course, they also affected the Caribbean at large. And these are those domestic examples. So such as, the hurricanes that we just saw that affected the Caribbean, Irma and Harvey, in addition to, West Coast wildfires. APAN has been there. They've been collecting lessons learned. We're going to also explore more with APAN and the crisis action team here in the headquarters. So this is some real world support they've provided, and they actually have tailored presentations that are specific. So if you need any information specific to their humanitarian and disaster response support, I can get that for you. But here we just wanted to introduce to you the topic, to know that the support is there and that they do offer a lot more than just helping us connect through distance learning. And then we saw that those knowledge managers support exercises. They have assisted, in recent times with several exercises as shown here. So these are, we have some Pacific focus, all the way through, crisis exercise in New York City, National Guard in Washington State as well. So those are the exercise crisis response support, and that what they take from providing their support are lessons learned, of course, is one aspect. So besides PACOM in New Zealand, just some examples shown here, several other organizations now do have permanent APAN portals, and what they do is they share content for the HADR events there. And if your particular staff section, organization is interested in leveraging APAN for the disaster response, I can help put you in touch with Laura. Also functions as their customer engagement specialist in addition to their knowledge manager. So we'll be talking more with her, in the very near future, specifically to get prepared for the hurricane season that's coming, unfortunately. So I mentioned a few times I've spoken about things that are coming. So APAN does have some big plans for the future. They are moving to the cloud, and that is happening, I said before, in the immediate time frame. Actually, the 10th through the 12th, APAN will shut down. They are migrating currently from their current services and converting over to AWS GovCloud, so Amazon Web Services GovCloud. And starting the 13th of August, they will then switch over to SharePoint 2013 for the back end. So that's migrating at that time as well. You as a user, and all of us, won't see that SharePoint 2013 front end until the first quarter of 2019. And that could be currently their program manager has told me anywhere from, of course that could even be March of next year, but we'll know more soon. And then they anticipate that by the third or fourth quarter of next year, the migration will be complete to 2016, and that'll be everything. Front end, back end will all be seeing a 2016 interface at that time. So that timeline's currently getting refined because they're having that ArcGIS demo that I mentioned on 23rd September, and that's just going to affect how things go. But they do have a pretty impressive plan for all of this, and they're on point with it. And they do have the Premier, if you're in the Premier support groups, you will be invited to get a calendar invite for calls that talk about the future of this. So if it affects you, please let me know, and I'll be happy to get you in that community. So here, lots of numbers. I know we have ORSA here, so this is probably, familiar territory for some. But the point I want to make with this slide basically is just that APAN is growing. It's a great opportunity, for your organization to consider using this tool because it's only getting better. They're improving it all the time. It's not something that's going away. So it does have a lot of growth, both in, I didn't include slides, but I do have slides even by countries, top countries that are using it, and information like that as well. So we have gotten a lot of increased usage from Japan, things like that. So I've mentioned we talk about creating an account. And hopefully so far this overview has shown you the value of APAN. And then to get an account, you would go to apan.org that you see down on the bottom. And then you'd click on the green join button, create an account there. All you need to get an account is a valid email address. And then that link that I included on the bottom of that slide is hyperlinked to a knowledge base article that APAN has. And if you have any issues, that knowledge base article provides some additional details and troubleshooting suggestions. And then once you have your account, you can then fill in your profile and then search for those groups to join that I showed earlier. I mentioned mapping a few times, and I want to point out this additional resource. So they call it a MapHub, kind of like our SPUG, but it's the APAN Mapping Users Group. So it's a community specific to APAN GIS and mapping stakeholders. So if you are a mapping user and you want to share information about GIS products, enhancements, or just provide feedback to them on the future enhancements that they're going to be working on, it's easy. You can just click join, and that one is open and it's available for anyone who wants to join. So that link there, that MapHub link right underneath the picture, you can click that link and then click join. They also do have fantastic support. I've been pleased, they give us almost immediate feedback whenever we've had issues. I had connectivity issues once, minutes before setting up a class, and they were able to help us. So they used to staff it 24 hours and just didn't have the need, they weren't getting the calls in the middle of the night, but as much. So they are staffing their phone hotline now 6 days a week for 12 hours a day. And then they do have a web ticketing system for anything that you might need their help desk for. And then because they have a knowledge manager, they do have a helpful resource of learning articles as well as live training. So Laura does provide planned cyclical training, and that's coordinated by Ms. Coutinho that we know pretty well. So we did cover a lot of ground today. There were quite a few slides just so we could see visuals of some of the examples of what those features look like. So I will, at this time, see if anybody has any questions online or here in the room on APAN.
So for creating the account, like for our division, we want to create an account. When you create it, can you list additional individuals that will be on that account for the APAN?
So when you first make your account, that's specific for an individual, so a person. And then when you're creating it for an organization, that would be the community of interest. And then that's the one that's based on Intelligent or SharePoint.
Well, I'm talking about for the Adobe Connect.
Yes, so that would be something, once you have a community of interest, then the Adobe Connect feature becomes available
So you have to create your individual and then a community then?
Yes.
In order to get the Connect?
To get the Connect, that's correct. Yeah, so if you are just a user who's not tied to a community of interest and you want the Adobe Connect, that's something that has to be created first. We've inquired in the past.
Any USAR groups, brigade or higher using? I think you said that not a few minutes ago. Do you mind repeating that a little to the microphone side of the house?
Yes. So AR North, the Army Reserve Engagement Cell, also uses it, and there are several other entities just now off the top of my head. But if you go on the APAN site, there are a lot of Army Reserve, National Guard entities that are using APAN and have been using it for quite some time.
Mm-hmm. And then here in Army Reserve headquarters, our Knowledge Management Directorate has a site, and if you needed to get to that quickly, in the email that I sent where it says all the 4 different areas where the slides for this are posted today, if you were to click the one that says APAN, that'll take you to the document library for our APAN site, which has some information that's there as well. So whenever we have knowledge management working group summaries and the quarterly newsletter and things like that, we're posting that in APAN too. Any questions?
Is there as it's used, especially from our side, our reserve, is there someone that goes through to make sure we're not sharing something that we shouldn't be sharing?
So that actually is the community owner,
Okay, so it's on.
owner's responsibility,
Right.
and then if you have a team
Yeah,
and you're giving, so we, you know, on the KM team, for example,
right,
it's also the person who's posting or
Okay.
uploading it, yeah, they should be
Okay.
making sure and just notified, hey, if you have, you know, rights to
Yeah.
be uploading a lot of things
Okay.
to our community, make sure you know not to post anything classified
Okay.
there, of course, so. That's a good question. Do we have any more questions on the APN?
I just re-asked.
Okay. All right, so if there are no additional questions at this time, or if you think, you know, when you go back to your desk, if you think of any, please, you know, feel free to ask me. But I'd like to thank you all for joining us today, for joining the CAM Directorate. And again, for anyone who's not been, if you haven't met Captain Winfield yet, Captain Winfield's our training officer. So we're happy to have him on the team. We hope you all have a wonderful day. Appreciate it.